So coming up next weekend is going to be UFC 299, and this is a card which so many people are excited about. There are a lot of people out there that think that this could be the card of the year, and in my opinion, I think it has the opportunity with the matchups that we've been given to be the most entertaining card of the year. On paper, maybe it's not as good as UFC 300, as that does have quite a few title fights and Charles Oliveira, and maybe not as, on paper, big as the Conor McGregor card, because Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor, but you look through this card, it is stacked, man, and the matchups on this card are so good. I mean, this is going to be such a fun card. So many fun fighters on this card as well. I just genuinely cannot wait for it to happen. I'm very, very excited for it. But before we do get into that, I do want to talk about the We Want Picks 3-day free trial, which you can get if you do sign up using my code ARTEM. You can get a 3-day free trial using my code, and you can cancel at any time. Aside from that, it is $10 per month, and you get access to everything We Want Picks, like their tools, as well as their bets, Angelo and Jacob's bets, as well as bets and articles from, I believe, 4 or 5 more channels, as well as an AI fight predictor as well. So you've got so many different tools. Of course, I write an article for them every single week, which is on that premium membership side, and I've already written an article on the PFL Europe card, which is coming out, and I will be writing an article on UFC 299, as well as, of course, the other regional shows, which is what I do behind the scenes at We Want Picks. But now, let's get into the first fight of the night, which is going to be Joanne Wood taking on Maryna Moroz. And we've got Joanne Wood here. She's 38 years old. It seems like a lot of people are starting to fade her as we're getting on Tapology odds Maryna Moroz at -200, and I think those odds might just be a little bit wide. She is on a little bit of a losing streak, but I do think that she is going to be the more well-rounded fighter, and it does seem like Joanne Wood is starting to slow down. She's coming off a split decision win over Luana Carolina, but if you go on MMA decisions, every single person seems to believe that Joanne Wood did win that fight, and some people even scored that fight 30-27 for her. I guess the round that you could give Carolina is the first round, but that was a very high volume fight. Joanne Wood landed 130 strikes to Luana Carolina's 100 strikes, and that's kind of what she is. She is a Muay Thai striker. She is a striker for the most part, and she's taken on Maryna Moroz, who I believe is the more well-rounded fighter. Most of Moroz's wins are by submission, but I do believe she has a Master of Combat in Ukraine for kickboxing. I could be wrong about that, but she is a pretty good grappler, a decent wrestler, a decent grappler. A somewhat similar stylistic matchup, I guess you could draw, is the Maria Agapova fight, but I would say Maria Agapova is a much worse grappler than Joanne Wood. But in that fight, we did just see Moroz kind of dominate with her grappling, and I do think this is a fight which we do see Moroz go out there again and look to use the wrestling and grappling. So I am going to be picking Moroz. Kind of a medium confidence pick, not super high, -200. I feel like there's just better opportunities on the card to put your money, so this is going to start off the card. I'm going to pick Maryna Moroz. I'm going to pick her to win by decision or submission, which are obviously probably her two most likely paths to victory. And now we've got CJ Vergara taking on Asu Almabaev, and I believe Asu Almabaev is the real deal, and I feel like the odds makers feel a very similar way, lining him at -440, which is very, very wide. Of course, we did recently have Azat Maksum lose recently to Charles Johnson as a massive favourite from Kazakhstan. But I think Asu Almabaev is like the more well-rounded prospect out of the two. Asu, of course, is really good at striking, but he's also really good at grappling, and that's what we got to see in his debut when he did take on Ode Osborne. Managed to get the takedown, and then, of course, did work to get to that rear naked choke 6 months ago. And now he takes on CJ Vergara, who is a fighter I just don't really know how to feel about, to be honest with you, because he's a decent boxer, but he does get hit. We saw that in his fight against Daniel Lacerda, and then he was able to beat Vinicius Salvador. He is a good wrestler in his own right, but I feel like in this matchup, maybe that offensive wrestling would be quite good to put Asu Almabaev on his back, because we haven't really seen too much of that. Definitely didn't see it against Ode Osborne, but he has taken on some pretty good guys. Zach Makovsky, I believe, is a former Bellator champion. He also beat an undefeated fighter in Brave, and just a bunch of other guys on the regional scene in Kazakhstan before coming into the UFC. Asu Almabaev, he's a good striker, he's a good grappler, and I do believe he's going to have to put on that well-rounded game plan to defeat CJ Vergara. Vergara is a guy who has actually proven to me that he's a lot better than I thought he was. I did think in his debut he took on the very hot prospect who is no longer a hot prospect. Where is he? Clayton Rodriguez. It wasn't his debut, sorry. I thought he robbed Clayton Rodriguez, to be honest, but he's bounced back against 2 other guys at flyweight that just maybe not UFC level, like Salvador and Lasota. I think Almabaev's the real deal, minus 440. Once again, I mean, maybe you could put him in a long parlay, but I just feel like those odds, once again, just very, very wide. So I'm going to go with I'm going to go with Almabaev, and Almabaev is the pick. I am going to pick him to win by finish. I do think CJ Vergara is out there to be finished. We saw him take a lot of damage in his fight against Daniel Lasota. That is the fight where he was just running around the octagon, running away from Lasota. Kind of a hilarious fight, I'll be honest. And then Lasota gassed, and Vergara was able to get a crazy, crazy comeback. And now we've got Robelis Despaigne taking on Josh Parisian. And Robelis Despaigne is probably going to be one of the most hyped up UFC debuts of the entire year. He is 4-0, but he is actually a bronze medalist in Taekwondo at the Olympics. And he recently come over to MMA, and he's just kind of dominated everyone. And what I mean by dominated isn't just dominated to guys to decision, finished guys quite late in the fight. In his last 3 fights, he's won in 4 seconds, 3 seconds, and 12 seconds. And I believe this might be the first time I've seen it, or it's definitely the most recent time, of course. After he beat Miles Banks, I believe during the next fight that was announced, Fury FC announced that the UFC had signed him. I believe someone at the event called up Hunter Campbell, and Hunter Campbell just signed him on the spot there. He hasn't really fought the best level of competition. You look at there, a lot of debuting guys, a 1-0 guy in Miles Banks, but I mean, it's kind of hard to tell how good he really is, because the only time he's gotten decent amount of time in the octagon was in 2022, and since then he's just been KOing people. So I guess I've just kind of trust in that Olympic level of him. I don't know how good his takedown defense is, because I know Josh Parisian's going to want to go out there and do the takedown and get a takedown. I can't see Josh Parisian seeing Robelis Despaigne, seeing the fact that he's, I believe, a bronze medalist, as I said, in the Olympics at Taekwondo, seeing that he's KOing everyone in less than 10 seconds, and think, yeah, I'm just going to strike with this guy. But I don't think Josh Parisian's that good at striking. I mean, he got knocked down by Alain Baudot. I know he beat Alain Baudot, but that fight, oh my goodness, it was weird. Alain Baudot was throwing his punches like this, almost, like literally like this, and he knocked Josh Parisian down. Robelis Despaigne, I'm going to pick him by KO. To be fair, though, there isn't really like that much evidence out there to kind of support the pick, aside from the fact that he's just been KOing everyone. But it is worth noting again, not the best level of competition. At least Josh Parisian beat a guy that was in the UFC at one point in Bordeaux, and he did beat Roque Martinez, who probably is the worst heavyweight to be signed to the UFC of all time. I've talked myself into it. Despaigne by KO in round 1. That's going to be a pretty common kind of pick, kind of bet, just because every single win of his is by KO in round 1. I think he's legit. I think if he beats Josh Parisian, they're just going to jump him in there with a very top level guy. They might even do Despaigne versus Justin Tuffer, if Justin Tuffer's not too injured. Who really knows, to be honest with you. I think they're going to do something like that, something kind of crazy. But yeah, I'm going to pick Despaigne. I think after this, because he's almost 36 years old, the UFC is going to want to push him. He's going to get a very good opponent for heavyweight, or at least like a top 25 guy like Justin Tuffer, as I mentioned before. Now we've got Felipe Lins taking on Ion Cutelaba. I don't have odds for this fight. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared enough for with FightOdds.io, because I thought everyone would have odds for this one. But anyway, I am going to be picking Ion Cutelaba in this one, but it is a matchup where both guys are really, really good in the first round, and then they both slow down and they both gas out. Felipe Lins, to be fair to him, recently hasn't really been doing that too much. He did come into the UFC after winning the PFL Championship, and just disappointed. You know, he went in there, lost to Arlovsky, lost to Boza, but then he got a win over Pragnell, which he looked pretty good in. Did his thing where he looks really good in the first round against OSP and Grecian, to be fair. But I like Cutelaba because I think that Cutelaba is dangerous on the feet, but he can also use that wrestling as well. Whereas Felipe Lins is very powerful on the feet. He is going to be the longer fighter, slightly taller with a 78-inch reach, but he's 38 years old. And I just think Ion Cutelaba, as much as I just, like, everyone wants to fade Cutelaba, it's so easy to fade him because he's just so unreliable. Oh, man, I don't even know what I'm doing here, man. Honestly, like, picking Cutelaba is a very scary thing to do. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick Cutelaba. I think he's going to use that wrestling that he's got in the background. Hopefully, you know, he's going to be able to last a little bit longer. He recently just absolutely demolished Tanner Boza. And although he dominated Tanner Boza, I actually picked Tanner Boza in that fight, if I'm not mistaken, which is A little bit bad, I know, but I'm just going to pick him to beat Linz. It's such a low confidence pick. I feel like anyone that does kind of know Linz and Cutelaba understands what I'm saying. They're round one or bust kind of guys. Cutelaba, I would almost say more so, but I think he's dangerous. He's got that wrestling. He just dominated Tanner Boser. He's finally got some momentum after just getting smoked by Span, Walker, and Njoku, who I believe is all ranked fighters. I don't think Kennedy is ranked, but you know, the guys he lost to are at least really good. I'm going to pick Cutelaba by KO and quickly move on to a fight which I do have a pretty confident pick in, which is Michal Pereira. Michal Pereira went out there and he did kind of what I thought he would do, but a lot better. And he smoked Andrei Petroski. I thought he was going to beat Andrei Petroski, but I didn't think he was just going to beat him that quickly and that easily. I knew that he was the much better striker, but my goodness, I didn't think he was just going to KO Andrei Petroski that quickly in the first round. Obviously, if you know Michal Pereira, he's got that dance fighting background. I don't know the name of the martial art, but it's like a Brazilian dance fighting. And it does show in his fights because he's a very good kickboxer that can spin, that can jump. Like, he can do a lot of things. Spinning kicks, jumping kicks. He actually lost the fight once because he was doing so many flips on his way into the octagon. Then he gassed out in the first round because he was jumping off the cage. Where was it? It was against Tristan Connolly, who was a featherweight, by the way, that fought him at 170. But anyway, he has had weight making issues. He was meant to fight against Stephen Thompson, missed weight, and I think Stephen Thompson turned down the fight. So now Michal Pereira, it's time for 185. And I think the move to 185 is going to be quite good. Do I think he's the biggest guy at 185? Not necessarily, but Michal Oleksiejczuk isn't either. And if you can believe it, Michal Oleksiejczuk was fighting at light heavyweight, and now that he's moved down to 185, I still don't even think he's that big for the weight class. I actually thought that Michal had a decent performance against an absolutely nightmare matchup for him in Caio Borralho, because Michal Oleksiejczuk is only a boxer. He's a pure boxer. I know a lot of people will say that he's got a little bit of wrestling in there too, because he does. He has wrestled a little bit before, I believe, and somewhat recently as well. He did get a takedown in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken, but he's a pure boxer for the most part. He doesn't throw kicks. I don't think I've really ever seen him even throw a leg kick. I think he's got it in the arsenal, but I've never seen him do it. He's just a boxer. And I think at the end of the day, Michal Pereira, has more. He's got more options on the feet. He can kick from range, which I think what he's going to do. He can obviously box as well. I think he's just going to be the more well-rounded striker, and I think he's just going to kind of make Michal struggle a little bit. Michal did lose a fight to Justin Jacoby in a fight which he looked really, really good in, but Jacoby was injured with both legs, and I do think that's a somewhat similar stylistic matchup, and I just can see Michal Pereira having success with his kickboxing style against a guy that's going to want to strike with him. If anyone does want to take the bet down to the ground, it probably will be Michal, to be honest with you. But it'll be interesting to see how this fight ends up working out. I am going to be picking Michal Pereira, and I'm going to be picking Michal Pereira by knockout. I've seen Michal finished before. He is a very tough guy, but I do think he's going to get finished again. I think Michal at 185, I'm very, very excited to see how he looks at this weight class. And now we've got Pedro Munhoz taking on Kyler Phillips, and I am going to say it, I'm not doing it, but I do think that Pedro Munhoz, man, I just cannot pronounce names tonight. It is 11 p.m. to be fair, but dude, I just can't do it. Pedro Munhoz is going to be a good underdog, and I can see people wanting to pick Pedro Munhoz because although he did lose his last fight to Chito Vera, I didn't think he had the worst performance in the world. He beat Chris Gutierrez in a fight which Gutierrez just never really got it going, and the pressure from Munhoz got to him. He arguably won the first round against Sean O'Malley before he got poked in the eye. And before that, just lost to Aldo and Cruz, who are, to be fair, legends at bantamweight. And obviously Aldo more so at 145. But Kyler Phillips, I think he's looking good, man. I know he come back after, I believe it was a PED suspension. I could be wrong about that. But anyway, Kyler Phillips is back. I thought he looked pretty good against Rayane Barcelos, and I do think he can beat Pedro Munhoz. This is a pretty big jump up in competition, though, for him, because before that, he beat Marcelo Rojo, who is not in the UFC anymore, and lost to Francis Marshall, which is just not really the best thing in the world. But Kyler Phillips, I've been worried about his fight IQ in the past, because I thought that he kind of just looked really get bad against Raulian Paiva. If you actually watch that fight, a lot of people do think Phillips should have won that fight, but in the first round, he knocks Paiva silly, and then just spends the whole first round doing spinning attacks, throwing 125% into his punches, and just doing so many things, and then he gasses out in the first round, and then Pereira, who's a flyweight by the way, comes back in round 2 and 3 and just starts to take over, and then Pereira ends up winning the decision due to the poor fight IQ of Phillips. So there is something to worry about there, but it does kind of tell you that Phillips does have a lot of tools in the arsenal. He can do spinning attacks if he wants to. He can grapple if he wants to as well. He's showing that. But I think what he does here, I think he comes out against Pedro Munhoz. He's pretty big for 135 as well. I think he pressures against Pedro Munhoz because Pedro Munhoz is a guy that likes to move forward and likes to pressure you. But I think Phillips might be able to have the power and the ability to do that himself. Munhoz, of course, when he did fight against Sean O'Malley, it was kind of an interesting game plan because he only threw leg kicks. I don't think he landed a punch or a kick to the body or the head in that first round, but he still arguably won the round anyway. Who knows? I mean, I think Pedro Munhoz is a really good fighter, but I just think at this point he's almost 37 years old, almost 38 years old, sorry. And Munhoz is just kind of that guy who you just give to the up-and-coming prospects and see what happens, because Pedro Munhoz is a guy that just says no to nobody. He says yes to anyone. I'm going to pick Phillips. I'm going to pick him by decision. Now let's get moving on up the card to Mateusz Gamrot taking on Rafael dos Anjos. I am going to be picking Gamrot here. Minus 355 is pretty wide, but I think Gamrot should be able to get past a nearly 40-year-old RDA who has been flirting with the idea of fighting at 170 for quite a while, and has been fighting at 170 for quite a while, because if you look, this fight is at lightweight. I can't really remember the exact date or day when RDA announced that he was going to fight at 170, but he expressed a lot of interest at fighting at 170, and I believe the Barber fight was at 170, and the Luque fight was at 170 as well. And now he's coming back to 155, a weight class which he decided to leave. Now that he's almost 40 years old, he's decided, you know what, it's time to come back to 155 and try and make a run, because you don't come back to 155 and fight Mateusz Gamrot as a way of thinking, you know what, this is just going to be my way of dipping the toes back and seeing where I am in the weight class. I mean, as much as I love Dan Hooker, I feel like if Rafael dos Anjos was fighting against Dan Hooker, that would more be a fight where it's like RDA is just kind of seeing where he's at. He's going to take on a very top guy, but he's going to be taking on a guy who isn't like in the top 5. I believe Gamrot's in the top 5, and a win over RDA would maybe give him a case to fight for the title. Potentially not, with Benil Dariush beating him recently. The fight against Arman Sarukian, of course, was a year and 8 months ago. But anyway, I feel like this is just RDA kind of going in the deep end at 155 against a guy who is really good. Mateusz Gamrot is just a really good wrestler, and he's one of the better pure wrestlers at this weight class at lightweight. And he did lose to Benil Dariush in a fight, which Benil Dariush just showed the ability to out-scramble Gamrot, and there were a lot of scrambles in that matchup. He went out there and took on Jailton on short notice, I believe only a couple of months after that Benil Dariush win. A lot of people think Jailton would have won that fight because he did more damage, but ultimately in that matchup, Gamrot was the one that was getting the takedowns, and it is worth noting again, he took that fight on short notice and managed to beat one of the most dangerous guys in the division, Jailton. And then, of course, he did kind of beat Philipe, kind of, but not really. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to call that a win. We'll just leave it there. The point is, Gamrot is he's a really good prospect at 155. I mean, he could have been a champion if Islam Makhachev and Benil Dariush didn't exist, but I do think Oliveira would beat him. But anyway, the point is, I think he's better than RDA at this point in his career. RDA is a very good grappler. He's a decent striker, and that has developed over time, but now he's almost 40, and although he's still looking good, like, he's still beating decent fighters, right? I just think, like, you know, like, why couldn't it have been the Paul Felder rematch at UFC 300, to be honest, actually? That could have been a fight that's interesting. It could have been him versus Dan Hooker. That's a fight that would have interested me as well quite a lot. I just think at this point, Gamrot, you know, he's a lot younger than RDA. I still think he's too good as well, and RDA is coming back to 155, although he's not really the biggest lightweight in the world. He is still very, very well built. He committed to 170, and now he's just not committed anymore. It just doesn't really make too much sense to me why he would come back to 155 after kind of saying that he wanted to make a run at 170. Maybe the loss to Luque changed his mind, but I'm going to be picking Gamrot. I'm going to be picking Gamrot by decision, and then we can move up to a fight between Katlyn Cerminara versus Maycee Barber, and of course a lot of you guys will know Katlyn Cerminara as Katlyn Chookagian, and it's because I believe she got married somewhat recently, or maybe she got married a while ago and only recently decided that she was going to change her surname to Katlyn Cerminara. And she's taken on Maycee Barber, who of course was really, really hyped at one point, and a lot of people thought she could have been one of the youngest champions in the world, and then Barber took a couple of losses, she did get injured, but now she's really rebounded, and she's kind of starting to look like the fighter we thought that Maycee Barber really could have become quite a few years ago when she still was very, very young and up and coming. She's on a massive win streak. Maybe not that one. She beat Montana De La Rosa. She beat Jessica Ai. She beat Andrea Lee, which is once again a little bit controversial. And then she did beat Amanda Ribas by KO. And this is where it gets interesting to me, because I don't really understand why Maycee Barber is minus 200 against Katlyn Cerminara, who has been the number one contender for so long now. Because if you do look into her, she lost to Valentina Shevchenko, and then she beat her sister, then lost to Andrade, and then she went on a 4-fight winning streak as the number one contender, I believe, against Jennifer Maia, against Amanda Ribas, which a lot of people think Ribas actually won, by the way, and Araujo. She's been the number one contender for so long, and now I feel like she's almost getting disrespected by the plus 165 price tag, honestly. Katlyn Cerminara is a striker. She's not very dangerous at striking, and she's not really that entertaining either. But that's kind of how she's managed to, I guess, make her career as a top women's flyweight prospect. And in the matchup, I do think Maycee Barber is going to be the more well-rounded fighter. And I think it's going to have to come down to, can Maycee Barber get the fight down to the ground? And can Maycee Barber out-grapple Katlyn Cerminara? And I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of sitting here right now, and I'm almost thinking no. Like, I genuinely think that Katlyn Cerminara is the better striker in the matchup against Maycee Barber. And I think that her takedown defense has proven in the past. I do think she can keep the fight on the ground. But once again, I just feel like Barber's got that momentum. She looked good against Amanda Ribas. She knocked her out, which was kind of crazy. But she didn't look that good against Andrea Lee, which is a kind of similar situation, a kind of a similar stylistic matchup. Cerminara she missed weight in her last fight. She lost her last fight, which was a year and a half ago. Who knows what's going on? Man, I actually come into this video wanting to pick Maycee Barber, by the way. That actually was the pick in my head. That's the pick that I've kind of researched and gone with. But I'm just going to change it right now on the fly. I don't think I've ever done this. I'm going to pick Katlyn Cerminara. Very, very low confidence. And as always, my finalized picks are on Instagram. I post on Instagram the night before all of my picks of the fight. So if my pick changes back to Barber, I'll let you guys know on Instagram and in Discord as well, or the We Want Picks Discord. I'm going to go Cerminara. Man, I don't feel good about that, but I just think she's a much better striker, and I think she can keep the fight on the feet. And now let's get back into a fight which I do have a pick for, of course, and this is in a fight which I think my pick will change. I am going to be picking Curtis Blaydes in this matchup. I do think Curtis Blaydes is Jailton Almeida's worst possible matchup. If he was taking on a guy like Sergey Pavlovich, I would say Sergey Pavlovich is super, super dangerous, but stylistically, it's a good fight for him. I think Curtis Blaydes is the worst stylistic matchup for Jailton Almeida, but with that being said, or maybe it's Tom Aspinall. Maybe a lot of people think it's Aspinall. I could definitely get behind that too. But the point is, if Jailton Almeida gets past Curtis Blaydes, I do think that he definitely is a guy to really start talking about as a potential champion. And not only a potential champion, maybe a champion, especially if he can beat Aspinall, a champion that could be champion for a very, very long time, because he's a very, very good fighter. And it is worth noting as well against Jailton Almeida, this guy is a former light heavyweight. For some reason, I don't really know why he started fighting at heavyweight in the UFC after winning at 205 on the Contender Series. But that's something that happened. He went in there against Danilo Marquez. In fact, I think that was a fight at 205 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. And then he took on Parker Porter, Anton Turkalj in like a weird catchweight fight where Anton Turkalj, his team obviously probably just thought that, hey, we're taking this fight on short notice. We don't want Jailton Almeida to weigh in at 260 pounds when Turkalj is going to weigh in at 215 pounds. But anyway, he dominated that fight. Dominated against Shamil, but did kind of have some problems. Dominated Jairzinho, and then had a surprising amount of problems against Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis, for some reason, just refused to get submitted by Jailton Almeida. Kind of made Jailton Almeida not look that good on the ground, because before that he's just been dominating all of these guys in the grappling. But against Curtis Blaydes, and I know a lot of people question his fight IQ, and that definitely is something to be questioned because it has led to him losing in the past, of course. I think Curtis Blaydes is smart enough to not take this fight down to the ground, and more importantly, I think his wrestling is good enough to defend the takedowns of Jailton Almeida. Of course, Jailton Almeida, he doesn't really get takedowns by pure wrestling, by picking guys up and slamming them down. A lot of the ways that he does get the fights down to the ground is he shoots, gets in close, and then he usually works in a trip or something along those lines. Of course, single legs as well was a way that he gets people down. But I do think that Curtis Blaydes being one of the better wrestlers in the division at heavyweight, is going to have good enough wrestling to keep the fight on the feet. And in the striking, I think Curtis Blaydes is the better striker. We've seen out of Curtis Blaydes recently that boxing has really, really improved. And the main way he really showed it off was in the matchup against Chris Daukaus, which, to be honest, didn't age well, but in that fight, he spent the whole first round boxing Daukaus and then, of course, knocked him out early in the second. He lost to Sergey Pavlovich in a fight which he just kind of showed no intention of getting the fight down to the ground, which was just really stupid, to be honest. But if he shows no intention of getting the fight down to the ground against Jailton Almeida, I believe his takedown defense is good enough to keep it on the feet, and I think his striking is much better. And of course, in the boxing, he's going to be the one that's going to be closing the distance against Jailton, so it will get a little bit dangerous there. But I think Blaydes, I think he's the better striker. I think he keeps the fight on the feet, and even if he is, in my opinion, dumb enough to take the fight down to the ground, but maybe not, because maybe Jailton's grappling isn't as dangerous as we thought it was, because he struggled so much with Lewis, and that fight was so boring. I think that Blaydes, if he does get the fight on the ground, we don't know how good Almeida is off his back. A lot of these guys that dominate in top position, if they get taken down, they're not quite the same. And I feel like maybe Blaydes could expose that part against Jailton Almeida's game as well. I'm going to pick Curtis Blaydes. I think he's a better striker in the matchup. I'm going to go Blaydes. I'm actually going to go Blaydes by decision here. But maybe a late TKO, maybe a KO on the feet, as he showed power in the past against Daukaus. Who knows? But that's the pick, Blaydes. I think he's actually a slight favourite at the moment. And Almeida's the dog, or maybe Blaydes is the dog. I actually can't really remember, but it's minus 110 on Tapology. There are odds slightly favouring one side as well. But now we can move on. Petr Yan taking on Song Yadong. And I'm sorry, guys. This is going to be a really unpopular pick, but I'm a big believer in Yadong Song, man. I think he's really, really good. And I do think he might be good enough to beat Petr Yan, which kind of is crazy to say, because I'm talking about a 26-year-old up-and-coming guy that's really, really popped off out of nowhere, to be honest. You know, he did take on Corey Sandhagen, and he had a really good performance against Corey Sandhagen. He arguably won a couple of rounds. The first two rounds, he definitely, I think, won the first round, but then Sandhagen started to take over. Obviously cut open Song Yadong, and in between the fourth and the fifth rounds, the doctor, of course, stopped the fight, which was fair, because the cut was going to go into his eye. Like, that was a very fair stoppage. That was a good fight. And then he beats Ricky Simone, shows off incredible takedown defense there, and just kind of just rides the storm of Ricky Simone, which is quite impressive. I don't think it's aged too well, but hey. And then he beat Chris Gutierrez in a fight which Chris Gutierrez did take him on short notice, to be fair. But hey, he looked good against Chris Gutierrez, who's still a top-level fighter at bantamweight. But Petr Yan is a big step up in competition, because when we talk about guys at 135, you might look at Petr Yan as 1-4 record. I wouldn't look into that too much, because Petr Yan still is one of the best bantamweights in the world, and arguably to some people might be like a top 3, top 2 bantamweight on the planet right now, which is kind of crazy to say when you look at the record on paper. But if you look into it, he lost to Moroz in a fight which Moroz just spams takedowns. He lost to Sean O'Malley in a fight which a lot of people think Yan could have won. And then he lost to Sterling in a fight which a lot of people think Yan could have won. But in my opinion, although I'm not the biggest Sterling fan, I do think Sterling won that fight, because Yan did absolutely nothing in round number 1 until that 2 minutes 30 of that fight. And then Corey Sandhagen, that is, in my opinion, one of the best fights I've ever seen. In fact, I think did it get Fight of the Year? It was nominated for Fight of the Year. But that's a really, really high-level striking matchup. If you haven't seen that fight, I recommend you go back and watch it, because it just shows off how good Petr Yan is at boxing and how good Corey Sandhagen is at striking. And they both make reads during the fight, and those reads end up obviously coming through when they get to land good shots and kind of make the reads on the opponent. It's just so high level, and it does show how good Petr Yan really is at boxing, and of course the DQ. But hey, the reason why I'm going with Song Yadong is I think this is a 3-round fight as well. I actually got to triple check this. It is. Okay, a 3-round fight. Petr Yan, notoriously slow starter. He's always been a very, very slow starter in his fights. And he can't get away with that in a 3-round fight. Against Aljamain Sterling, he lost that title. He lost that title fight against Aljamain Sterling. Because if you watch that fight, I don't even think Petr Yan throws a strike until 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the first round. And in that first 2.5 minutes of that fight, Aljamain Sterling has been throwing little shots. He's been throwing little leg kicks. He's been throwing jabs. He's just been doing very small amounts of damage, but at least he's been working in that matchup. And Yan, yes, that's what he does. He makes reads. He's a slow starter because he wants to make reads. He wants to see what the opponent is going to do so he can say, oh, hey, he did this. I can react to it with this if it happens again. And then he, just does that. He makes reads. That's kind of what making a read in a fight is. But anyway, you guys understand what I mean. He's just a slow starter, and he's going to lose the first round if he does that. And he loses the first round in almost every single one of his fights because of that slow starting. And Yadong Song isn't really a slow starter. He's a very aggressive guy with good boxing, with decent takedown defense, which is only getting better and better. He's obviously one of the better guys at Team Alpha Male now, and he's been training at Team Alpha Male for a while. And I believe there's actually quite a few fighters from China training out of Team Alpha Male right now. And Uriah Faber is a guy who I think is just really, really good at creating game plans for fighters. He created a really good game plan for Song Yadong to defeat Ricky Simone. In my opinion, I thought he looked really good against Corey Sandhagen. I know he started to lose that fight when the cut was open, but a lot of people think it could have been 2-2 going into the 5th round. A lot of people think it could have been 1-3 in favor, of course, with Corey Sandhagen. But the point is, Corey Sandhagen's an elite fighter. A lot of people think he might be the best bantamweight in the world. And he made it close, made it competitive with him. I understand it's a loss and Petr Yan has beaten him. But the point is, I can see Song Yadong going out there with his really good boxing, with his power, with his cardio, with the pace, with the forward pressure that he likes to put on as well. And just kind of catching Yan off guard maybe in the first round. And definitely winning the first round. Not giving Petr Yan the opportunity to make the reads that he wants to make. And Song Yadong, I think he's definitely going to win the first 2 rounds. I think he's going to win a decision in that way. Do I think he finishes Petr Yan? No, I definitely think that Petr Yan is too good for that. I'm picking Song Yadong, man. He's an underdog. I thought he was going to be a less popular pick than this because there's 41% of people on Tapology picking him. But let me know what you think on that fight. I guess the argument for picking Yan is just Yan is too good to pick against, really, because Yan is really, really good. And I think I actually picked him to beat Moroz. And of course, Moroz made me look really silly, but I had good reasoning for that. But I'm going to pick Song Yadong. It feels bad to fade Petr Yan, but I'm going to pick Song Yadong. I'm just a really big believer in him, man. I think he's the real deal. And I do think he can get past Petr Yan. Now we've got Gilbert Burns taking on Jack Della Maddalena. Another fight with very close odds. And I feel like the big main reason for this fight having incredibly close odds will be the Vasil Hafez fight, of course. But I personally put down the really bad JDM performance due to that. Just him cutting weight a couple of times within a week. He cut weight the week before when he was meant to take on Sean Brady, and then it was rebooked for Josiah Harrell, who I hope is doing well, because Josiah Harrell had that issue with his brain, of course, which was scary, to be honest, and hopefully everything's going all good with him. And then he takes on Vasil Hafez after cutting weight to make that fight against Harrell or Brady, and then he has to cut weight again, and of course he cuts the weight. It's always a pretty big weight cut for JDM as well at 170, and he looks bad against Vasil Hafez, but you can't score that fight for Hafez in a damage-based scoring criteria. And I think another big one as well in that fight is JDM gave Vasil Hafez absolutely no respect whatsoever, and Hafez was able to take him down over and over and over again, and hopefully it's something that JDM's worked up, because Gilbert Burns is probably going to try and take him down. And then he goes out there against Kevin Holland, and there are people that think Holland won that. But once again, I do think on the damage-based scoring criteria, you have to score that fight for JDM. But before that, he was knocking guys out silly, was in a crazy first-round KO streak. That has slowed down a lot more. But JDM, long story short, really good boxer with a lot of power. He's taking on Gilbert Burns, who is a former lightweight that's moved up to 170 pounds, a guy that has fought for the title before, a guy who had a lot of success in his title fight. I thought it was more recent than this, but it must have been a long time ago now. A lot of success in his title fight against Kamaru Usman, where I believe he knocked down Usman in round number 1 and then just let him stand up, or just didn't really go after him at all. Kind of a weird performance. And then he beat Stephen Thompson using pure wrestling, and that might be a fight that you look at when you do tape study for this fight. And then he beats Khamzat Chimaev. Sorry, loses to Khamzat Chimaev. A lot of people think he beat Khamzat Chimaev, though. But I think Chimaev won that fight. I think he did more damage. Was it rounds 1 and 3 that you give to Chimaev? Anyway. And then Burns, he recently lost to Bilal Muhammad, which is a little bit unfortunate because he was injured in that matchup. I think JDM is good enough, man. I think he defends the takedowns. I think he respects Gilbert Burns. And I think he beats him, dude. I actually might have to have a look at a photo that I have with Gilbert Burns to see how tall he really is, because it says he's 5'10", but I am like barely 5'11". Like, I might as well be 5'10". I feel like he's not that tall. Hold on, I'm trying to find a photo of me and Gilbert Burns standing beside each other. Maybe he is 5'10". Okay. Anyway, Gilbert Burns is going to be slightly shorter, slightly smaller than JDM. But I think JDM's boxing is going to be better than Gilbert Burns' striking. I think he's going to be able to put the pressure on Gilbert Burns as well. And ultimately, I do think that JDM finds a finish on a nearly 38-year-old Gilbert Burns. So I'm going to pick JDM to win this one here. I think he puts the boxing on him. I think his takedown defense, he's got to be working on it, right? He has to be. Hopefully, it's good enough. I do put down the Basil Hafez fight just due to him having 2 weight cuts in a row and just giving Basil Hafez no respect whatsoever. Hopefully it's been something he's working on. I'm going to pick JDM. I think he beats Burns. Burns is going to be a very popular underdog. Definitely one of the underdogs I was referring to when I was talking about the underdogs on the main card. But hey, there's more, dude. I'm picking a lot of underdogs on the main card. Not many underdogs on the prelims, because the underdog that I'm picking right now is Michael Page. I am going to be picking Michael Page to beat Kevin Holland, and the truth is, this is going to be kind of sad, I guess, and maybe not a reason that a lot of people are going to want to hear, but the reason why I'm picking Michael Page is because I'm fading Kevin Holland. I just don't know how to feel about Kevin Holland, because it almost seems like Kevin Holland's not competitive. That's kind of the way I see it, you know. He says he's not interested in the belt whatsoever. He doesn't want to become a champion. So where's his motivation? His motivation obviously must be just to make money, but I feel like in a combat sport, your motivation has to be a little bit more than that. You know, I feel like in a combat sport, you have to believe in yourself. Like, people call UFC fighters and boxers and everything, they call them delusional, but you have to be, because in MMA and in any combat sport, you have to believe you're going to win. Like, you have to, because if you believe you're going to lose, you're going to go in there and you could get hurt. You could get seriously hurt. It's like when I made my one and only boxing fight, man. Like, I was so delusional in hindsight, dude. Like, I was just saying, like, how good I thought that I was, even though in hindsight, I was really bad, which is kind of why I've stopped. But anyway, I won my fight, but I was just so believing I was going to win, and I feel like if I lost, that was never even in my mindset, you know. And I feel like everyone is kind of like that with Kevin Holland. He seems too relaxed, and I don't think it's a front that he's putting on, because I don't know if he could really put on a front like that, like, hey, I don't care, I don't want to be a champion, I just want to do this and that. And maybe I feel like with someone like MVP, you know, he's just signed to the UFC. Hopefully MVP's been put on a massive deal with a lot of money. He's got new motivation. Maybe MVP, I know that he fought for the Bellator title recently, but maybe MVP's motivation for his career was to become the UFC champion. And now he has the opportunity to do that. And he's 37 years old now, or almost. And he's thinking, that's now or never for me, you know. I believe that out of the 2 guys, you know, who's the guy that's waking up at 6 a.m. to go for a run before training to warm up? Or who's the guy that's, you know, staying behind from practice to learn one or two things? I think it's the guy, an MVP, who's saying, you know, maybe his motivation's different as well, and I've just completely misread this, but I haven't even gotten to the fight yet. I just don't like Kevin Holland's mindset. It's just so scary to me, you know. And I understand he's a really good fighter. He lost to JDM. Before he lost to Wonderboy in a fight which he just decided to strike. He just decided to strike against JDM. He beat a couple of guys, obviously Chiesa, who's on his way out, Ponzinibbio, who's on his way out. And Michael Page might be on his way out as well. But Michael Page is a guy that, to be fair, is going to cater to Kevin Holland's wishes. Kevin Holland wants to fight against strikers. You know, he wants to strike against people, even though he's got a black belt in BJJ. And Michael Page is going to honour that wish. He is a striker through and through. Both guys nearly identical in reach. Not really. Kevin Holland's got a long reach. But both guys have long reaches. Both guys are 6'3", and both guys are kickboxers. MVP is kind of an interesting case because a lot of people think he maybe could have won that title against Logan Storley. I even think that Scott Coker himself thought that MVP won that fight. But hey, it is what it is. He showed good takedown defense in that fight, and then he beat Goiti Yamauchi, which is, I love Goiti, man. I'm so sad to see, because he injured Goiti, I believe, for that leg kick. So sad. Took a lot of damage against Mike Perry. A lot of people think he was robbed, but the point is, I think he beats Kevin Holland, and I'm picking him as an underdog. The mentality from there is so scary, and I think I've just rambled for probably like 5 minutes talking absolute nonsense and not even really talking about the matchup and the fight. But do I think Holland has the skills to win? Of course, that's why he's the favorite. But I think the guy that's more motivated is MVP, I feel like MVP. And also recently, like, they just announced that they're going to do a card in London, a fight night in London. Maybe MVP's thinking he could headline that card if he wins this fight. You just never know. I'm going to go with MVP. I'm going to go with him by decision. Let's see how that goes, man. Let's see how that goes. And now we've got another underdog that I'm picking. And my goodness, Benoit Saint-Denis fans are going to let me know if Benoit Saint-Denis wins, because I have, like... Benoit Saint-Denis fans are crazy, man. Like, I probably shouldn't say that because I'm going to get more death threats. But, yeah, I've never got more death threats from the fan base than Benoit Saint-Denis. It's actually kind of crazy. But I'm going to be picking Dustin Poirier to win this matchup, man. I genuinely do think that Dustin Poirier has been overlooked a little bit as the underdog here. I know that he just got KO'd by Justin Gaethje, but he still beat Michael Chandler in the really dirty fight where Chandler was cheating. He still beat McGregor twice. It's just, I guess in hindsight, man, maybe I do see why a lot of people picking the young up-and-coming guy. But Benoit Saint-Denis, the way that he wins this fight against Dustin Poirier is he needs to take him down. No one in my luck he's going to knock out Poirier. But anyway, the point is, I think that Dustin Poirier is going to be the better striker in this matchup. It's also 5 rounds, and Dustin Poirier has had significantly more 5-round experience than Benoit Saint-Denis, because Benoit Saint-Denis, you look into this guy's career, every single one of his is by finish, which is so impressive and so awesome. But you do kind of have to wonder, can this guy make it 5 rounds, if Dustin Poirier's putting it on him? And maybe like Dan Hooker, Benoit Saint-Denis has a lot of success in the first 2 rounds, and then Poirier really comes back in round 3, 4, and 5 to put on a lot of pressure on Benoit Saint-Denis. It's a 5-round fight, and I feel like it does just come down to if Dustin Poirier, can survive the first 2 rounds, and I think he can. And I think if Dustin Poirier does survive the first 2 rounds, of course, do I think that Benoit Saint-Denis has good cardio? And a lot of people will comment something like, do you really not think that Benoit Saint-Denis has been training 5 rounds? Yes, I do. But, like, a fighting situation's a little bit different, Like, we see a lot of guys gas out in 5-round fights, even though I'm sure they've been training 6, 7, 8, 9 rounds in the gym. I think Poirier, he's going to put a lot of pressure on Benoit. Maybe not early. Benoit's going to welcome a lot of things as well, but Benoit's going to be looking for that takedown using his elite grappling, which I think is probably going to be better than Poirier's grappling, to be honest. And, dude, this is actually just such a good fight, because Poirier has always been that guy, which we've been saying, won't fight up-and-coming contenders. He'll only fight money fights, and he's finally doing it. I'm so excited for this, but I do think Poirier wins it, man. I think he beats Benoit Saint-Denis. He just dominated Favola with that crazy KO kick. He beat Moises in a dominant performance as well, and he beat Bonfirm and Bonfirm. I've seen a lot of people call him Bonfirm, which is why I'm calling Bonfirm. But anyway, I'm picking Poirier. I'm picking him as the underdog, a pretty sizable underdog as well. Seems like a lot of people are fading Poirier. Maybe it's because they don't like him. To be fair, I'm not really the biggest fan of Poirier either. I do think he's got a pretty unlikable character. But you can't deny his skill set, man. I do think he's going to beat Benoit Saint-Denis in that one there. But if he does win, my goodness, I'm probably going to stay off Twitter for a few days, because I'm already stressed out enough as it is. Let's get to the main event. Sean O'Malley taking on Marlon Vera in the rematch. And of course, now my internet has decided to not work, so we're just going to go to the main screen until it does load. Sean O'Malley taking on Chito Vera. Of course, this is the rematch from a few years ago. And to be honest with you guys, in that first fight, I didn't have a YouTube channel, but I do remember winning a bet against my workmate, because I told him I think that Marlon Vera is going to win the fight, and I won the bet. It was a $10 bet, and the internet has just decided to not work. So we're going to rock with it from here. I'm so sorry. And I won $10, so thank you, Chito. But I'm going to be picking O'Malley in this one here. I do think O'Malley is going to win the rematch. I think that O'Malley is the best striker at 135 pounds. Some people might disagree with me. Some people might think that Corey Sandhagen is better. And to be honest with you, if Sean O'Malley fought Corey Sandhagen, I would pick Corey Sandhagen. If Sean O'Malley picked Merab Dvalishvili, I would probably pick Merab, but I'd really think about it, to be honest. It's just not going to load, is it? Oh, well, I'm sorry, guys. But I think I would pick Merab to beat him. I think I'd pick Patchy Mix to beat Sean O'Malley as well. But Patchy Mix is signed to PFL or Bellator. something like that. I think Sean O'Malley beats Marlon Vera, though. Do I think that this is the UFC just giving Sean O'Malley a free title defense? No. No, I don't, to be honest with you. But I do think it's a good matchup for Sean O'Malley to get a good title defense against a good, respectable fighter in Marlon Vera. But the problem with Marlon Vera is he recently just kind of got dominated by Corey Sandhagen in a fight which one judge gave to Marlon Vera, which is crazy. But Corey Sandhagen was able to out-wrestle Marlon Vera. Corey Sandhagen was able to out-grapple him, was able to outstrike him as well. I think that Sean O'Malley is obviously not going to wrestle Vera. I think if anyone wants to wrestle, it's going to be Marlon Vera. And I think O'Malley's just going to be able to outstrike him with the reach and length advantage that he does have in the matchup. And I think he's just going to keep the fight on the feet, and I think he's going to win it. The way that Marlon Vera really wins fights is he actually loses until he wins. You look at that fight against Rob Font. Rob Font is outlanding Marlon Vera the whole fight. I think he outlands Marlon Vera in almost every single round, but Marlon Vera wins that fight because he lands some devastating shots and knocks down Rob Font in, I believe, 3 or 4 rounds out of 5 rounds, and Vera takes the win, obviously, by the damage scoring criteria, but Font did land more strikes throughout the fight. I think that could be a similar fight as well. I think maybe Sean O'Malley is going to be out there having a lot of success against Vera, landing a lot of strikes, and maybe Vera lands a big shot on O'Malley and really makes things interesting. But I do think that O'Malley's striking is too good. I do think that O'Malley is the best striker at 135 pounds, and I think that he's going to kind of show that off against Marlon Vera here. I think it's going to be a pure striking matchup, and a fight which I do think Sean O'Malley is going to ultimately win. Now it just comes down to, do you think O'Malley wins a 5-round decision, or do you think he finds a finish? And I'm kind of going to go on the side of O'Malley actually finding a finish against Marlon Vera here. I think that it's going to be a little bit of a grudge match, a little bit of a revenge sort of matchup for Sean O'Malley, and I do think that he's going to be able to find a finish in this matchup, but most likely later on in the fight. I think that there is questions, though, to be said, that maybe Sean O'Malley, there's bad blood between these two. Maybe O'Malley is going to make mistakes because he doesn't like Chito. Or maybe O'Malley's going to think about the time when he fought Chito, and of course Chito managed to win due to O'Malley just getting, I think it was a leg kick, a perfectly placed leg kick from Vera that shut down the leg of O'Malley, and maybe he starts to think about that. Who really knows? But yeah, the internet's just not going to work. The internet in my place is so slow. That's why I can't do fight companions anymore, unfortunately, guys. I'm sorry. But anyway, I'm going to be picking Sean O'Malley to win the fight, and I think that Sean O'Malley is going to be able to get it done by knockout late in the fight. I'm going to talk like round 3, 4 kind of finish. If it goes any later than that, I think O'Malley is going to win the decision. He's going to be the minute winner. Every opponent of Marlon Vera just becomes the minute winner. I think even Dominic Cruz was up on the scorecards before he got caught, and that's stylistically a similar matchup. I'm going to pick O'Malley. I'm going to pick O'Malley to get it done by late finish or by decision. Thank you guys for watching.